Before we dive into today's episode, I want to share with you that the doors to my 10-week program, Panic to Peace, are open. Over the course of the program, I'll guide you and support you in creating a healthy relationship with anxiety so that the anxious thoughts, physical symptoms, panic attacks, and fear no longer run your life or make the decisions for you. Instead of constantly managing or fighting anxiety, you'll learn how to respond to it in a way that creates more calm, confidence, and freedom. If this feels like the year you're ready to reclaim your life and stop letting anxiety call the shots, I want you to head to the link in the show notes and join now. I'm Shannon Ireland, your host of a Healthy Push podcast. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. Everything used to be hard for me. Even just driving 5 minutes from my house used to feel impossible. But now I absolutely live for travel and adventure, and I experience lots of peace and joy. I've not only reclaimed my life, but I've helped hundreds of others to do the same. Here, we stop managing anxiety, and instead we create a healthy relationship with it. One where you say goodbye to the anxious thoughts, symptoms, panic attacks, and fears, and you actually live your life. Forget complicated strategies, quick fixes, or the same old hacks you've heard 100 times before. Each week, I'll bring you simple, actionable advice and honest conversations that lead to real, long-term healing. You aren't just an anxious person, my friend. There are reasons why you're struggling with anxiety, and these are things you can fix and heal from. And this is where that journey begins. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Hello, and welcome back to a Healthy Push podcast. Today, I have a really special guest with me. We're going to talk about, I feel like it's such a buzzword, such like a just thing that so many people are talking about right now that I really want people to understand. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with Lilly Risch, and she's an EMDR therapist. So we're going to talk all about EMDR, but very specifically for anxiety disorders. So, Lilly, welcome to a Healthy Push podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Shannon. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I am really excited for this conversation. It's really funny. Lilly and I, before we got on, we were talking about Giggly Squad, and we're both listeners. And I know a lot of people in my community are listeners. And I was telling Lilly how funny it was, like listening to their podcast and hearing them say EDMR and it's
Yes.
just so cute. But I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
it's also serious because we want people to understand what it is and the benefits and like if it's going to be a good fit for them, right?
Absolutely. And one of my also favorite parts in that episode was when they were just joking. They were like, what if therapy is the problem? Like, I'm having a great day. I'm having a great day. And then I'm like, oh my God, I have therapy.
Yeah.
But that actually does speak to the point of like, I can kind of touch on this later, but like EMDR can feel like it makes things, and I'm doing air quotes, like worse before it gets better
For sure.
because we are stirring this stuff up. But I just thought that was really funny on how they were talking about it because I know my clients feel like that sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really want to be here, Lily. And I'm like, yeah, I completely get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you leave a therapy session and you're like, oh, dear God, I feel like I just left like hot yoga or something.
Yes.
Okay. So before we dive in, just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in Milwaukee area, Wisconsin. I moved here about 4 years ago from Colorado. I have a group practice. I have an individual caseload. I see clients about 2 to 3 days a week. I do EMDR. I just started doing ketamine assisted EMDR, which is also a really just interesting way to kind of get deeper into the work. I am a EMDR consultant, so I'll be launching an EMDR consulting business in January. I'm a mom. I have a 7-year-old.
Ah,
And so I don't share a lot about my parenting journey publicly, but that is, of course, a huge part of my identity and my role and what I bring to the table.
oh, yeah. I love that. Same. I have a 7-year-old as well.
You do. Isn't
Yeah.
7 so fun?
Oh, it's so fun. But mine's girl and she is
Girl.
so dramatic.
Well, my son is very dramatic too.
Oh, well, maybe it's just the 7, right? It's such a good age, though.
It's a
It's always
special,
fun.
special age, yes.
Okay, so I'm so like, you mentioned so many things, and you saying the ketamine therapy, I'm like, "Ooh, maybe we'll have to have you back to
I
talk
know.
specifically
Me too.
about that
Yes.
because it's such an interesting topic.
Yeah.
It's something we're definitely hearing more on.
Yes.
But we're gonna stick to EMDR today. So let's just start with the very basic because I obviously want people to understand. Like, if somebody's hearing EMDR for the first time, how would you explain it to someone in like the most simplest, least intimidating way?
Yes, and I think this is something that we sort of have, like, an inside joke about as EMDR therapists because sometimes it feels like we're explaining it and we're not really hitting the mark, and somebody's like, "Wait, I'm more confused."
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna do my best with this. So, EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, it feels like an unnecessarily long name, but that's what we have. So, we use bilateral stimulation, which is either back and forth eye movements or tapping, which can look like a left, right on the shoulders or a left, right on the knees. Or we have these like fancy buzzers, one goes in each hand. Essentially, it's just a way for us to help our client get some sort of bilateral stimulation. So, bilateral movement is, for example, just taking a walk can be calming and help engage the parasympathetic nervous system. The other thing that it does is it mimics REM sleep. And so REM sleep is when our eyes go back and forth and it helps us process things quicker. So we work with our clients to figure out what type of BLS or bilateral stimulation works the best for them. What we're doing with the MDR is we call it targeting memories, experiences, representative memories that are still stuck in our nervous system now. So we use the word triggered a lot. Like when we're triggered, what is it really activating for us? With EMDR, we go back to that core memory, core belief, core feeling in our body. We target all of those layers,
Mhm.
cognitive, emotional, somatic, in order to like unlock it and rewire it, reprocess it.
Mhm.
We use those words kind of interchangeably in order to help once and for all let it go in our bodies and our nervous systems, not just in our brains.
Yeah, I love that. That is a very simple way to explain it because I think oftentimes people hear about, especially the rapid eye movement, and can kind of be
Yeah.
like, what? Like, what's actually happening when we're doing that?" And I think it can sound a little too simple and maybe silly to some to be like, "Is that even
Completely.
helpful?"
Completely. And also, speaking of how the media talks about EMDR, Mormon Wives had an episode
Yes.
recently, which I get for the television purpose of it, but it's hard to just explain something really simply because it's not simple,
Yep.
right? So, oftentimes we're not even using eye movements because clients like to have their eyes closed and that helps them go internal more. That's just the name of it. So,
Yeah. I know it's so tricky because there's like so many different ways that you can use EMDR and so many different ways it can look, and it is so individualized, and it's like maybe you're digging into like really deep trauma stuff, maybe you're just trying to like actually allow somebody to feel more and like work through some
yes.
stress and overwhelms. Like, especially watching a glimpse of somebody's therapy session, it's not
Yes.
really good representation of what
No.
EMDR is.
No, no. I think that they did their best and I get why they did it like that. So,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about how EMDR can help specifically with anxiety disorders. Because I think
yeah.
I've definitely had someone on, another therapist. We talked a lot about trauma and how it can be helpful relating to trauma. But can we talk about not just like the big T traumas or even
Yeah.
like little T traumas, but just like everyday fears and worries and those panic sensations? Like, how, or is EMDR even a good thing to help with that sort of stuff?
Yes, it is absolutely helpful for a wide variety of symptoms. I use EMDR very, very often in my practice for anxiety and depression, not complex PTSD or PTSD diagnoses. One of the biggest places that we need to start with EMDR is really understanding symptoms. So we understand symptoms from an adaptive information processing lens. And that means that as humans, as mammals, we believe that we're always doing things that helps us. So This is actually, speaking of 7-year-olds, I was reading my son is obsessed with everything animal world. I don't know if your daughter is,
Yep.
but we were reading about moray eels last night, and it was like moray eels have 2 sets of jaws, 1 set of jaws in the front of their mouth and 1 in the back. And I asked my son, I was like, how do you think that helps them? And he was like, maybe so that they can like double chew whatever they eat. And I was like, yeah. So actually, that question, how does it help them? How does it help you? Is we ask that question all the time in EMDR.
Mhm.
So translated to anxiety in us as humans, how has it helped to have that panic or have that anxiety? And it feels like a really odd question because the answer is like, well, it doesn't help me, like, help me get it away, right?
Yeah.
And first, help me take it away, like, help me decrease it. Like, that's why I'm here, right?
Yeah.
But we have to first understand why it's
Mhm.
been adaptive. And so, examples of that are really help. I mean, we really have to trace it back. And that's where it can become, I think, tricky for people not wanting to necessarily go back into childhood. However, that's where we have to start to understand symptoms because of how our brains develop and because of when we start like learning about emotions and developing, all of those different pieces.
Yeah. I think that is such a good question, and it does seem really, like, silly because 'cause you're there being like, Okay, can we just make the panic stop, please?" But
Yes.
understanding how it has been helpful, and I also too say to my students oftentimes, if you look back and can be a little bit more, like, curiously reflective, did it
Yes.
make sense why
Exactly.
anxiety popped up? And I think
Exactly.
that's really helpful because I think when you're asking how has it been helpful, it's like, of course, we're like, it's not helpful. Like, I'm panicking, losing my shit in the grocery
Yeah.
store. Like, this is so unnecessary. But it's
Yeah.
like, okay, no, but how has it actually been helpful? And did it make sense when it started showing up? And like, what was it trying to protect you from? And I think that curiosity is so helpful.
It is. And I know you talk a lot about self compassion.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest pieces that I think we miss sometimes in therapy or just in the world is moving toward fixing versus first understanding and being without judgment. Because the more we just resist it, like the bigger it can get. Right.
Yeah.
So there's so much self-blame and negativity that can come into like, "Oh my god, this is so stupid. Why am I panicking in the grocery aisle? I just need to get my together."
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Well, that's just an added layer of inner critic that is absolutely not helpful, right? Like, and that's sometimes so learned. So we first have to really like shift that and say, huh, like, okay, this panic part of me has helped me in the past. I get that it was really scary when my dad started yelling at me and there was so much pressure on me to get it right. That's how I'm feeling right now picking out cereal.
Yeah.
Let me just tuck that little child in right now. Tell her it's okay now. It's 2025. It's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, because it is so I'm glad you said this because our brains so quickly jump to that place of like, "What's
Yes.
wrong with you? Why are you freaking out? You're just in the grocery store." Like, you get it together and, like, all of
Yes.
that really negative, harmful self-talk comes into play, and it
Yeah.
just makes I know from personal experience, like, makes that panic even worse, that fear even more heightened.
Yes. And so, like, whether it's with a therapist, a coach, a friend, a partner, developing, like, sometimes we need that to be modeled externally, like the
Mhm.
self compassion or the, like, that makes sense. Like, that part coming in, like, it happens. Like, let's just acknowledge it. Then people can start to develop that, like, inner voice. And especially if people didn't get that when they were growing up because oftentimes the anxiety or panic is just misunderstood as a quote unquote, you're too sensitive, your feelings are too much. That's that reparenting part. Yeah, I love internal family systems work too. It blends so beautifully with EMDR. I'm not like a formal trainer or anything like that. I use it pretty loosely with parts work, but really being able to develop that, like, nurturing heart because most of the time, people who have an inner critic didn't get that, compassionate parent of saying like, wow, you have really big feelings right now. It sounds like you care so much about that dead raccoon on the road. Like,
Yeah.
let's just letting you feel it, right? Versus a pressure of like, I have to fix it or whatever else kind of came from that. So there's so many different layers that we have to start really understanding before we just jump right into eye movements or
Yeah.
bilateral movements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think because
Yeah.
it personally, I've done EMDR and going into it,
Yeah.
it can't be just like, okay, and we're gonna sit down and like watch this thing pinging back and forth across the screen,
Yes.
and how does that make you feel? And it can be really like I can't imagine starting there because that can be a really overwhelming place when you're already experiencing a lot of that anxiety and fear and
Yeah.
panic. It's like
Completely.
being in my body maybe doesn't feel so safe right now.
Absolutely. There's so many different, like, layers with EMDR, though, and I find that what can be the most effective is starting with what's coming up in the room.
Yeah.
Like, so many times I'll have clients who struggle with anxiety, and we're in EMDR, and they're like, "I'm not doing it right." And I'm like, "Trace that back to I'm not doing it right. I have to do it right." That's the theme. That can possibly be the theme, right? And of course it's coming up in the room because 'cause you've spent all this money, you've scheduled this session, you're like, EMDR is this magical thing,
Yep.
right? And
Please let it be this magical thing.
I know, and it's
Uh,
it's it's amazing, but nothing is the magic,
yeah.
in my opinion, you know? So, when I'm thinking about anxiety, I'm thinking about the theme of the anxiety,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Kind of what's underneath it. Cause I think we
Exactly.
always just look at anxiety as like a bad, taking over. But usually there are layers, right? Cause it's a protective emotion. So it's like, what
Exactly.
is underneath that? And I think it can be incredibly frustrating, I know, to go through this and be like, okay, and what are you feeling? And like, what's coming up? But
Yeah.
really, the more you understand and you can like see it more compassionately, it's like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, right? So
Absolutely.
let's dig in a little bit more because I'm like, I know people listening are like, but okay, Shannon, Lily, I am struggling with that panic. I am struggling with that fear. Like,
Yeah.
how do we, really lighten it? So for people with panic and agoraphobia, there's so much fear, right? And especially, I think, let's get specific, especially that fear of panic, right? Like,
Yeah.
fear of panic, the fear of the sensations that come along with panic, the symptoms. Like, can EMDR help with stuff like that? Like untangling the fear of the sensations, the fear of basically fear.
Yes, absolutely, and I see that a lot. So, I find that sometimes with EMDR, we have to really back up and target the fear of emotion, right? So, if we have a hard time feeling and we have a lot of blocks or protective parts, EMDR is not going to be helpful because we are not then able to get to the affect.
Mhm.
So we're processing on 3 different levels with EMDR: cognitive, what do I think about that? I'm not good enough. Somatic, like I feel that tightness in my chest, and emotional, it feels scary, the scared, right? So saying I'm scared is different than actually feeling that sensation of scared in the body. And like what you're saying is I'm not gonna let myself get scared because that's too much. I can't handle
Mhm.
it, right?
Mhm.
So, what we would do with EMDR, how I would approach that is understanding that. How does it make sense that there's repression of feelings?
Mhm.
How does it make sense that it was the best option for this client to put those feelings in a box
Mhm.
and not touch them and keep them locked away? So the brain can say, well, I know this is a safe therapy space, Lily. Like, I know I can express my feelings and feel them in here. But the body is saying, absolutely not.
Mhm.
That is way too scary. So it becomes a 1% at a time game. It becomes like maybe that panic is first felt in the office as just a little bit of a high heart rate.
Mhm.
And then we're pendulating back to the safe, calm place, or we're grounding, right? Maybe we're developing some good resources like a nurturing figure that can say, your feelings are safe in here. It's okay to feel in here. I've got you, kind of stuff. We can talk a lot about feelings, for example, and say things like, the body feels scared when things are scary. It's as scary to kids to be rejected on the playground as it is to be in a car accident, for example. Like, really providing a lot of psychoeducation on feelings because the guess is that wasn't provided. The other piece to understand is attachment. So, for example, when I was scared, what did mom do?
Mhm.
Did mom freak out? Because that's, I think, what that can happen a lot where it's it's so avoided in the family, and it's so generational, and it's just passed down, right? Of, I have to fix it. I have to fix that fear or feeling. So therefore, it's just too much. We can't feel it in here. Versus a, like, riding the wave of the feeling without
Mhm.
fixing it, teaching kids to then emote. So, I mean, that's just such a great question because so many times we skip over that, and then people can get flooded in an EMDR session or can actually have, like, a full-blown panic attack, which then is a really scary experience. Um, and that's not, we need to instead be able to really move at a pace that feels emotionally safe while at the same time, like, finding our client's edge so that we can, like, gently help them, open up a little bit in that affect.
Yeah. And I think this is not, I don't know, this just kind of popped into my head because I think oftentimes when you're getting into this work with a therapist, this is not just like the first or second time you've sat down and met with this therapist.
Not at all.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's important, right? Because
Yeah.
oftentimes when you're struggling with panic agoraphobia, you already have such a lack of self trust and safety. And it's so important, right? Who you're sitting down with and that you actually have a connection and it's going to be feel safe, right? And that you're even able to go there and do any of this work. What you said is so important, right? I think so many people, whether it stems from childhood or maybe an experience or an event, right? A long time of like stuffing emotions down and trying not to feel and trying to avoid
Yeah.
is such a big cause, right? Of feeling like I have zero tolerance, like I can't feel anything, right? And I especially don't want to have a panic attack. Like
Yeah.
so many people I work with, couldn't even say the percentage, but a lot of people, right, don't even experience the panic because they're trying to do anything to
Yes.
make sure that they don't experience it.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine working through that is incredibly challenging, right? Because you've probably had years of not feeling for very valid reasons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so just to sort of, like, walk through this, because I think as therapists, as EMDR therapists, we have to do our own work
Um,
on what does it feel like? What
yeah.
did I learn about feelings? What does it feel like for my client to start feeling scared in my office, and how am I going to respond to that? So there's a feelings phobia, like, throughout our entire culture, I believe.
Yes.
I think our kids are learning it differently, at least my son, like, he knows what anxiety is. I'm like, "How do you know what anxiety is?" Like, he's like, "I anxiety is when you're uncomfortable." Like, wow.
Yeah. Talk about stuff I know that we never learned,
Wow.
and it's just, like, such it makes me so happy that, like,
Me too.
movies like Inside Out
I know.
exist. It's like,
I
in
know.
our childhood, are you kidding me? We were just watching people get the animals, creatures getting murdered, and you're like,
I know.
nothing explained.
Oh my gosh, I know, right? And I'm like, "Oh my god," they were doing, like, a hand on heart, hand on belly breathing in their public school classroom the other day when I was volunteering. I was like, "What? This
It's
is
so cool.
amazing." Sorry, I digress. I tend to get on little tangents sometimes. Well, so it's really knowing your client and preparing them too. Like, if we're starting to hit up against, for example, being yelled at by a parent or feeling like they had to achieve, And that feeling really, really scary. And because that's the current trigger of like feeling pressure that can come up, for example, with like a presentation. And we trace that back to being consistently critiqued by a parent, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to talk about, okay, so what feeling would line up with that memory? What would make sense for you to feel in this office if we're targeting that memory? It would make sense for you to feel scared. What would that look like? Yeah. And talking about how part of EMDR is being able to sprinkle in the missing ingredients. And the missing ingredients is no one was there to witness that feeling for you. So you had to shove it away. So, what we can then do with EMDR is we can help you move through it in a way that's emotionally safe. Because I'm there as a therapist and I can say, yes, that was scary. Notice that in your body and let it come up.
Yeah.
And making sure our client knows it is not going to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
This is not going to last forever. The bilateral movement is going to help you move through it, but how much essentially we have to like understand our client and prep for like how much do you want to let it come up? How much can you tolerate? How much do you want to tolerate? And I've had clients say like nope, never, and I'm like that is your choice. And I've had clients say I want to feel the scared in here. I need you to let me feel it. So that's where we have to work with our clients and really understand. But I have seen incredible release and incredible progress with clients who do want to feel what was never and feel those feelings in a way that's like it's attuned to. Like me as a therapist, I am there saying, yes, that is real. You were scared. It's over now. Like, we're able to so much of EMDR as a therapist being present with our client, not like overwhelming, but being able to like really be there as I'd say like anchor. Like, I am here. I've got you. Um, this is real
Yeah.
and just let it come up.
Yeah. That was actually something I was going to ask about because I know being in that room, right? Even when you have a good connection, even when like you feel that comfortability and safety with your
Yeah.
therapist, I think EMDR can still, of course, feel overwhelming. And it's like, how, as a therapist, do you help clients to feel that safe and that sort of steadiness and like things don't kind of go off the rails, you know what I mean? Because I think it is like
Yeah.
you're worried when you walk into that room. I think just anytime, I mean, I can
Yeah.
speak for myself of like, you don't always know what's going to come up and you don't always know how you're going to feel and what your tolerance sort of is going to be. So, how do you keep things feeling safe, right? And steady?
I mean, it's such a big yes, it's such a big question. It involves, I think, our own practices, our own healing, ongoing consultation, which is why I think just to share the way that I've set up my practice as an out of network practice allows me to do that for myself and my clinicians because EMDR is not a service that insurance pays anything else for. And it is such an involved service for our clients that I think to do it effectively needs ongoing support and ongoing investment from us. And that's just a part of the mental health system that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm like kind of trying to take myself back. I didn't do
Yeah.
EMDR when I was struggling with an anxiety disorder. Funny enough, I did it just like when I was feeling a lot of stress and overwhelm. And I went to my therapist and I said, I'm not good at feeling right now. Like, I
Yeah.
need you to help me feel because I
Oh,
learned, like, in my anxiety
yeah.
recovery, this is you can't avoid it, right?
Yeah.
So, if somebody is really struggling with a lot of those deep rooted, like, I'm not safe. I can't handle the sensations. Like, I can't handle panicking, right? Is something bad going to happen? Can it really help to alleviate a lot of those beliefs? Because those can
Absolutely.
be really strong.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, one of the first things we start to understand with EMDR, and this is a very cognitive therapy technique, is what would you rather believe about yourself now? Like, what
No,
would
can you talk more about that? Because like,
Sure.
you piqued my interest, but people
Yeah.
maybe didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, so Do you like, what would you, instead of "I can't handle the anxiety,"
Yeah.
what would you rather believe to be true now?
Yeah.
And when we ask believe, we mean, like, feel to be true as well, like, head to toe,
Yeah.
because there's a difference between logically I know that, but my body doesn't feel that. A
Yep.
logical brain, emotional brain. So if we're working on moving from, we call these NCPs, negative cognition, positive cognition, negative belief, I can't handle my feelings, to I can handle my feelings.
Yeah.
It is not that simple, right? It feels simple,
Yeah.
but it's not. That's where we're moving toward, and we ask scaling questions like, "How true does that feel?" On a scale, how yucky does "I can't feel my feelings" feel,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then we start to really dig into, I can't feel my feelings. I can't handle my feelings. What memory goes with that? What image? What feeling in our body? And then that's where we start with the reprocessing.
Yeah.
But if, even just that simple cognitive reframe, even if we don't believe it, it is still helpful to see it and to say it and to think
Yeah.
about it. You don't have to believe it
Yep.
100%, but is it like a 20%?
I lo
You know?
I love this because I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
reframing is one of the most helpful
It
things.
is.
It was one of the most helpful in my journey, and I can see it with students that you kind of don't even allow yourself ever to go there because you
Yes.
don't see it to be true, you don't feel it, and you don't believe it, and so a lot of times
Yes.
students will tell me, like, or ask, "How can I get myself to believe it?" Right? Like, and I say, "You don't have to force it." Like, we're
No.
not trying to get you to believe it, but
Yep.
just to start to go there, right? With like, maybe things could look differently and feel differently, and I could have a
Yes.
different experience. Like, very specifically, right? Thinking about, I have a lot of students who have that, I don't know, I find it more a classic story. Like, I was driving, I was on the highway, and I had like a
Well,
really intense panic
driving is
attack.
all the time. Oof.
Yeah, and it's such a common
Yes,
experience,
it is.
and I think this is one of those pieces that can be really helpful, like, how can we reframe this?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know people are
Yeah.
like, "I have this specific thing," right? And it wasn't really like, for some people, a lot of people actually I've worked with, it's not really like childhood related. Some pieces sure might be, but it's more of like, I just had this really intense, scary moment
Yeah.
driving or at the
Yeah.
doctor's or whatever it is. And it's like, that's the thing that can be really helpful sometimes to look at and how can we see it differently?
Yes, absolutely. Driving comes up all the time. Driving, flying.
Yeah.
I think they're very adaptive phobias because we're not meant as humans to be however high up airplanes are going, however fast airplanes go. Like
Yeah. It's
it's like
getting a while now.
it's not. We're meant to be like foraging in the forest, you know?
Yeah.
So from an evolutionary perspective, like driving and flying and fear of spiders and snakes, that all makes perfect sense. So we see that come up all the time. And just to put a quick plug in, I have targeted that with EMDR, for example, driving with, for example, very common car accidents, multiple car accidents. And then we get to a certain level and then there's still more yuck. And then that actually traces back to childhood stuff. So
Mm.
it's all about how deep somebody wants to go. But when we're thinking about like a fear of driving, it is really helpful to even just ask yourself, like name the theme of it, even if it doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
So somebody can have anxiety during driving and it can be connected to I'm not safe, or it can be connected to I have to keep it together.
Mhm.
I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to fail. I'm not good enough. I have no control. Also, is there anxiety as a passenger and not as the driver? I have no control. So, naming the theme of it as an I statement, even if it is not going to make logical sense, this is the emotional brain talking. Then being able to say, what would I rather believe about myself now? I have enough control. the control piece is a whole other podcast conversation, right? Because that's a whole big piece. I am safe now. I'm a good driver, right? What is it what are the facts? What would you rather believe about yourself now? And then really working on embodying what we call disconfirming experiences. So if we're in a car accident and it was really scary, and then that sort of connects to I'm not safe, right? That is sort of continuing to come up as we're driving now, right? The truth is, you're driving you're safe more often than you're not when you're driving. Like, you're safe more often than you're not, but your body doesn't always, like, feel that and remember that. So doing things like sitting in the car and really, like, focusing on being safe in the car.
Mhm.
Like, I am safe in the car now. And so with the EMDR, we call that positive resourcing. People can do this on their own. Laurel Parnell's book, Tapping In, is a great resource for people. It's not technically EMDR, it's just called positive resourcing. And it's a way to just really enhance those positive neural networks that sometimes get lost when something bad happens to us, right? So it's doing things like saying, I am safe, and I'm going to remember that time in the car when it was a really pleasant drive,
Yeah.
when I took good turns, when the sun was out, when the sun was shining. So we'll even do that work in EMDR to help people get more into the positive experiences of it, or the exceptions. So even just exception finding can be a great way to do it. When was a time that you didn't feel panicked when you were driving,
Yeah.
or you felt less panicked?
Yeah. No, I love that stuff because our
Yeah.
brains obviously aren't great at being like, "Hey, but do you remember that time?" They're always like, Do you remember this time where you absolutely lost your shit and thought that you were gonna die?" It's like, "Yeah,
Yes.
thanks. That's so helpful right now."
Yes. Fire alarm.
Right, right. But it is so helpful. You don't I think this is where like EMDR can come in handy. I mean, in so many
Yeah.
ways that like it just helps you to see things more realistically, like see things
Yeah.
actually the way that they are. And it's really hard when you're in it to do that work because you just like it's a lot of it's just anxiety and fear and like you can't see things clearly. So
No.
I think it really can help with a lot of that clarity and like just starting to look at things differently. Okay, if somebody's like really scared about EMDR, or just like this seems like a lot, or they've heard a
Yeah.
lot of, I feel like, I don't know, maybe we should do this first. Like, I think there are so many misconceptions about EMDR that kind of have made it seem scary or made it maybe seem like not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
What are like one or two misconceptions that people have about EMDR?
It's not hypnosis.
Yeah.
So we are keeping one foot in the present and one foot in the past. That's called dual attention. It's not a quick fix. It's a really powerful intervention. And if you think about how many years it took for somebody to develop a panic disorder, or how many
Yes.
people have lived, like, it's complicated how that is wired and stored in the brain. And so it is a very effective way to look at symptoms, and it is incredibly helpful, and we can help people make progress a lot quicker than a traditional talk therapy, in my opinion. There's a place for all of the different therapies.
Mm.
However, it is complex because our brains and our nervous systems are complex.
Yeah. I think too, right, kind of what you're saying with this is like it doesn't have to take maybe nearly as long as you think, right? That
Yeah.
like when you look at it, when I look back at my journey, it was 15 years of struggling with
Yes.
panic and agoraphobia. And a lot of it was so incredibly unnecessary. And
Mhm.
like you were saying, a lot of what I did was talk therapy, and it was incredibly helpful in a lot of ways. But I would have benefited so much from so many other different
Yes.
modalities that like they just,
Yeah,
I don't know, it just wasn't there when I was struggling. But
completely.
I think this message, right, of it doesn't have to just because you've been struggling for 15 years doesn't mean it's going to take 15 years in therapy. It's like when you have something that you found to be really helpful and it's always this try it, right? If
Yeah.
my therapist was like, we're just going to try it and you will
Yeah,
literally know within 1 to 2 sessions if you feel like it's going to be helpful for you.
exactly.
And I was like, "What? Okay, then, like, she sold me on that because I was like,
Yes.
"I don't wanna be investing and, like, pouring all of this into this and have it not really be helpful." And
Yes.
I think that's helpful to know too of, like, you go into it, try it. If it's not helpful, you don't have to keep doing it,
Completely.
but at least give it a shot, and it can be something that really helps to expedite things, but
Completely.
get you that long-term healing, right? Not this
Absolutely.
quick fix.
Absolutely. I think another thing that I like to clarify is we're not doing eye movements or BLS all the time.
Yeah.
So it is absolutely important as EMDR therapists and more effective for us to understand and conceptualize symptoms in the right way. And that's honestly what we spend a lot of time on in consultation. We're not talking about like, how quick am I moving my fingers or how
Yeah.
thick is the light bar going? We are not like that, very rarely comes up. It's more of how am I conceptualizing this nervous system so that I can target it in the right way so that that helps us move forward.
Yeah.
Because if we're just, like, throwing a dart at a dartboard randomly, it could make things worse for our client, and that's why it is really important to conceptualize, and doing that with our clients is also we're still doing EMDR.
Mm.
We're still doing EMDR if we're spending 6 months in the prep phases before we're doing the eye movements. People can absolutely feel shifts and start to sort of unlock those memories without, actually doing the BLS.
Yeah, for sure. I love
Yeah.
that. Okay, so somebody is like, maybe I'm a little bit convinced. Maybe I should do
Yeah.
this, try this. And but they're feeling like, okay, this is scary and they're maybe a little bit terrified to start. What would you
Yeah.
tell that person?
I'd say interview a few therapists
Yeah.
and see how you feel. Most therapists offer a free 15-minute consultation. As I said, you can find therapists in network who do EMDR. You might need to wait on a wait list for that or out of network therapists, at least in my area, you'll get in quicker. Knowing your EMDR therapist's level, like where they're at in their training. So basic training, part 1, there's a part 1 and there's a part 2 typically. Therapists have to have completed basic training and then be in consultation to start using EMDR. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to see a therapist who's newly out of basic training. In my group practice, I have 2 therapists who are newly out of basic training because they're getting a lot of consultation.
Yeah.
They're getting ongoing conceptualization and talking about their cases. I also provide my therapists with ongoing consultation who are in my group practice because that's something that I think is essential when we're practicing such a powerful modality as EMDR. But you can ask that in a consultation call is when were you basic trained? Do you receive ongoing consultation? EMDR certified is the next level. You don't have to become EMDR certified ever, but therapists will do that if they want to continue to progress in the training journey. That means they have to have a certain amount of consultation hours and training. But therapists can be basic trained for their whole career and not receive any consultation, which doesn't mean they're bad therapists. It just means be curious about that and understand how they're getting ongoing support for their work. And then EMDR consultation consultant, which is what I am, we've done consulting hours, and I personally will never stop getting EMDR consulting. I have multiple consultants that I continuously, work with, but that's then a level, and then an EMDR trainer is a higher level where they're actually providing basic training. So just knowing that little ladder is helpful to understand how much support and experience your EMDR therapist has. As we all know, the rapport and the relationship is the number one predictor of positive outcomes in therapy, and that also goes for EMDR. So sometimes there's a narrative going around of like, you don't have to have a good relationship with your therapist to do EMDR. I really don't believe that.
Yeah.
I really think there needs to be trust, at least enough trust, in order to provide enough emotional safety in the room. That's a huge piece of where to start is who do you vibe with?
Yeah. I love that. all
Yeah.
helpful stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, Lily, if people want to find you, learn more from you, connect with you, where can they find you?
Yes, I'm on Instagram at forward.healing.therapy. And then my website, where you can contact me through my website or at Instagram, is forwardhealingtherapy.com.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been such
Yes.
a fun and helpful conversation.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
I hope you loved this episode of A Healthy Push. If you have, I'd be so grateful if you could leave me a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. This helps people to find the show and get the support they need. And if you know someone who could use a little push, be sure to share this episode with them. And for even more support, head over to ahealthypush.com for show notes and loads of tips, tools, and inspiration to help you on your recovery journey. I'll see you next week.